All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, December 17th. Happy Wildfire Wednesday. I think, Eric, we've now had this going consistent of lost count, but I think we've been doing this pretty consistent since July, August. So, got a good thing going here. And for all of you that were at TSI last week, thank you for coming. It was really an awesome show, and we're hoping to continue to build all things TSI and the Tech Council energy into other events like WUI, which is coming up. I believe, Eric, I should know this considering with the IFC, but that is in the March timeframe in Reno, I believe, this year back in Reno. So definitely make sure for all those interested in continuing the WUI, but also tech conversation to be part of that. But today we're continuing on this wildfire conversation. Today, diving a bit more into the fire medical preparedness conversation. Have some awesome guests that Eric is going to introduce you to. We are also going to put a link into all the chats about how you can subscribe to this calendar. So it just pops up into your calendar and you can just click and watch us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. So wherever you're watching it, this conversation is about you. Ask questions, be selfish. I will be monitoring it and bringing it to the chat and asking our speakers. And just really grateful that you are spending time with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it to Eric, our host. And thank you, Michelle, Todd, and Andrew for being here and excited to learn and continue this conversation.
Kevin, thank you, man. March 24th through 26th, you were on the money. Right month. Those are specific days for the WUI conference in Reno. Of course, if you're involved with pre-conference stuff, you can also look at the few days before that, but we welcome people to join us. And again, to everybody who's listening, we appreciate you being here. Like Kevin said, be selfish, ask questions. This is about you. This is about you getting information that's useful. And lucky for all of us, we've got a group of folks on deck today who can do just that. A couple people who work as medical directors in federal organizations, and they're helping navigate what right looks like in the medical world for our federal responders. And of course, we're also joined by somebody from Sedona Fire who helps not only in terms of local response, but he's been integral to the creation and integration of a really cool, essential, and innovative resource that's called a rapid extraction module, which all of these folks have contributed towards and we'll talk about. So I won't waste time talking about these folks and giving them introductions. I'm going to go through my list of the few of you and let you introduce yourselves because you bring a lot more to the table than I know, and we appreciate hearing it. Todd, let's start with you, man. Why don't you give us a bit of an introduction about who you are, where you come from, and how you got with us here today?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. My name is Todd Miranda. I'm a battalion chief for the Sedona Fire District here in Arizona. Came into the wildland world a long time ago, Type 2 crew, worked my way up to hot shots, did some helitac time. Uh, Now mostly doing single resource stuff, also done a lot of IMT work the last 5 years in the Southwest area, specifically as a medical section chief, which isn't really a national standard yet, but it is something that the Southwest teams have committed to. So all four of those teams carry that position who sits on that CNG to help advise the team and the incident commanders and the agency administrators on um, what was originally COVID and is just morphed more into this medical response that is seeming to be more and more relied upon as the fire seasons continue to get more intense, despite this rather slow last one. So, but that's me.
So, Todd, for my for my education, you say medical section chief doesn't exist now. Medical unit leader does. What's the difference between the two?
So the medical unit leader, it historically is, purist ICS, lives underneath logistics. COVID was the trigger that kind of brought the medical section chief into the standing it sits in right now with the Southwest area. Um, the section chief, it's part of that command and general staff. So it sits at the same level as an ops chief or a logistics section chief or a plans chief. And that way that medical component and that response is integrated into that CNG level. And they're having those discussions every day. They work real closely with operations and safety. as a support function until they become the operation. So once somebody gets hurt or running an incident within an incident and it's a medical response, then that medical section chief is able to step in and really help direct how the IMT is going to respond in support of that medical incident commander out in the field, trying to do the best they can with, a serious situation. You're muted.
Happens once, or at least once every show. I was trying to use the temporary spacebar version, and for some reason, it's not working all of a sudden. And Kevin will snicker and laugh because I literally do it at least once on every call.
I'm glad I
Um,
wasn't the first person, so thank you.
no, I'll be the first and
We
perhaps even the
forgive you.
last. Anyway, so knowing you the way I know you, I'd imagine that you'll be working towards making that section chief position something that's more permanent for teams and in
It
use, right?
it's definitely taken off in the Southwest. Some of the other teams and other regions are looking at it now because it offloads a lot of that cognitive workload from the ops chiefs and definitely from the logs chiefs who are very busy with everything the logs has to try and accommodate nowadays. It adds that person into the mix who's just focused on that, and it really allows the rest of the team to continue on with all the suppression efforts and all the background stuff that's happening on these large complex incidents that we're seeing go much longer in duration than the historical norm.
Got it. Well, we'll be coming back to more of the talk around the things that are happening in incident management teams and how they're changing and what you're creating for that after we meet our other two guests too. So, Dr. Curry, we'll go to Michelle because I got to start with the respect, but I'm painfully first name when it comes to introductions. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got where you are?
Sure, happy to be here. You got me okay, sound wise? Perfect, yeah. So Michelle Curry. So my background is as an emergency medicine physician for 35 plus years. I started my career active duty Army, work, and then transitioned to the civilian sector and did a lot of intermittent federal work with national disaster medical systems under HHS. Going on similar deployments to Wildland Fire, 14 to 21-day roles, yada, yada, same kind of thing. And did that as an intermittent for quite a while. In the meantime, also a lot of EMS medical direction for at least 25 years in at least 44 states. And yeah, I kind of came into the Forest Service. My current role is the National Medical Director for USDA Forest Service. That is a fairly new position within the agency, but it's been an absolutely fantastic experience. Been on board just about 4 years, and was just thrilled to be able to help them develop this program further within the agency. It started out as an integrated agency, and just kind of work on the bits that were needed to work. It's been fun. Still clinically active in the emergency room, weekends, holidays, so it's awesome. But yeah, and in the wildland fire space, I Forest Service rep on PWCG's EMC, and serve alongside the others on this call in that committee on whatever task groups or sub-task groups or subcommittees or subcommittees, wherever they ask. And so, yeah, to Todd's point, medical section chief has been something we've been talking about. Wow, a lot of the other things. So that's a little bit about me and my background, and I'll kind of pause there and we'll look for the questions.
So, Michelle, I am curious, and we'll explore the organization a bit in a second, but just briefly, when you're saying you're the medical director for the U.S. Forest Service, how many responders are under your control and guidance?
So of course, it does fluctuate with seasons. So anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 at a time across the country. So the way we have our program structured is those EMTs, advanced EMTs, and paramedics will function within their local unit And I have an agreement with about 90 different local physicians, local emergency physicians. And we work with on the local level to do training and specific things to that area, because we, of course, recognize the needs of an EMT on the Chugach National Forest in Alaska is totally different than the needs on the Uwharrie on the coast of North Carolina. So different needs, different training focuses. So that's that piece. And of those, probably 75% are in fire. So we have EMTs embedded in engines, hand crews, hotshot crews, short haul crews, helitack crews, smoke jumpers, in addition to the non-fire pieces. So wildlife biologists, researchers, avalanche technicians, climbing rangers, are also a little bit of a footprint of Forest Service, not so much as in the wildlife for everybody. And then, yeah, we'll have line medics. And then, of course, during the season, we have ADs. And so we pull in a lot of our medical unit leaders as well under the Forest Service CMS program. So it's a pretty broad footprint. That's been part of the fun is continuing to find out who is out there that needs the support of the program and the agency, and then develop the pathways to bring them into the fold with that support. And it's just created a great community for them too. Stuff we learned from the folks on the ground. And I love it. I love going out every year and doing fire tour and learning the hard way. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great job.
Sounds like it. Thanks for giving the introduction. And we'll come back to it because I do want to learn more about the organization, how it functions as well. Again, one last introduction, Dr. Southard, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you come from and
Sure.
how you got to your position?
Yeah, thanks for having us. So, Andrew Southard, and I'm a United States Public Health Officer. That's why I wear a uniform. The BLM decided to go that route when hiring a physician, and so that's a little bit of one of the differences of Michelle and I's program, although we're more similar than we are different for a lot of reasons. But my background is similar to Michelle's. I'm an ER physician. I originally started doing fire right out of college, or in college. I was riding an ambulance and then became a structure firefighter for a year and figured out I wasn't very good at sitting at the station. And so joined the Wildland side and did that for a couple of years. And I tell people this is really true. I applied to smoke jumper school and I applied to medical school. I didn't get into smoke jumper school. So I went to medical school and had to wait 20 more years to go on a fire. So that's the short end of it. But I'm here in Boise, Idaho. I practice at the trauma center here about once a week. And then the other time I'm here at the National Interstate Fire Coordination Center and currently work with the Bureau of Land Management as their Chief Medical Officer, National Medical Director for their program. And it's been a great job. So I've been here roughly 4 years in this role.
Excellent. Thank you to all three of you for joining. Do you go by Andrew or Drew?
I go by Drew.
Drew. So Drew, same question as I asked Michelle. When you're talking about medical direction for your workforce in BLM, about how many folks are you talking about? And then maybe you can start to jump into sort of explaining the program as a whole and what it looks like on sort of normal routine operations.
Yeah, sure. So currently we have 435 providers in our program. I mean, it's December, so some of them are laid off, but that's roughly that's the exact number we had this last season. And the intent of our program, which is one of the subtle differences I think between us and the Forest Service, is really our leadership designed this to be a initial attack embedded firefighter was who we were targeting with this. And historically, the BLM had tried to do this on some other levels, and each state had kind of come up with a program, but it really needed to be a national effort just based on the way we function. You know, we get mobilized nationally, and the jumpers over here at the base may be in Idaho at 10 a.m., but could literally go 2 places before the end of the day. So we needed more of a national presence and effort. So that started about 4 years ago. We did a pilot program with a couple of states and then rolled it out. And in the last 2 years, we've had a completely national program. So anyone who's really in the BLM as an EMT or is going to be in our program currently. And we have an EMT, we call it basic BLS level, with quite a few advanced skills. That's just where we have our scope of practice. We found for our firefighters that tends to be a good level that they can maintain proficiency. Again, these folks are not medical, usually outside of this program. And so we spend a fair amount of time in the spring training them. And every year they come on board, have a mandatory training period. We use online because we're so dispersed, but we use an online training for about 4 to 6 hour component of it. And then they have to get skills evaluations in person. And most of those are done throughout the country, different spots with instructors or myself. And then we try and do field days as well. So we were just reviewing our last end of the year stats. We actually trained about 500 people last year. Sometimes we cross train with the Forest Service, or we have some law enforcement officers that train with us. But our average training in the spring, we're about to get started, is 3 days. And it involves all of that. So do the didactic portion, we do the skills check off, and we do a field day. And separates us a little bit from other EMS programs is we're really focused on fire. And so our field days are using the incident medical reports, communicating on there, using and thinking about the extraction devices we have specific to fire. So it is EMT, but it's very focused on kind of the demographics of injury we see and the places we work. So that's the summation. Then we try and get everyone trained. We start in the Southwest. We'll be in Tucson in the first week of February, and we'll go all the way up till mid-June usually. And in June, we're somewhere in the Northwest, and we just, as fire season rolls on, as people start coming on board, we're continually training them. And we have now providers that are everywhere from Alaska to our eastern states are in Jacksonville, Mississippi. So we have them all over.
And so if I understand this correctly, your workforce, your medical workforce, these are folks who are also doing firefighting, and this is another thing that's added to their portfolio. Their focus is providing EMS care for the firefighters. That's essentially, they're not, for instance, being like community responders.
Yeah, 100% correct. We do run into about 20% of our calls involve the public. And that's either that they're on federal lands, or where it really happens is our folks drive a tremendous amount of mileage on small roads in the middle of nowhere, and they are first on scene of bad traffic accidents. So that's where most of our we call them civilian, but public calls come from. Everything else is, a firefighter. And so that's the intent. And we have kind of three things we say we want. We know we're not going to be, our guys are not going to be the most proficient if you throw them in the back of an ambulance and put them on street calls. That's not what we designed our program for. Some are very good at that, but that's just not the reality. So we train them for initial resuscitation of the injured firefighter, incident leadership, because we've seen that failure before, and then extraction out of the wildland fire environment. And our goal is to get them to the local EMS units or local EMS resources. And that's, so we focus a lot on that, which I think makes us different from a lot of EMS programs. And a lot of historical thought process was, we'll train you as an EMT, and we take these good street folks and we put them in the wildfire environment. And they, most of it's the same, but that 10-15% I think is pretty critical. And so that's really what we're doing. And like you said, all these folks their primary role is hotshot, smoke jumper, engine crew member. I mean, that's what they're going to spend 99% of their season doing. And, the reality is most of our providers get one call a year. Some obviously get a few, some don't get any. And so it's a lot of training for a small number of events that they're going to run into in their career. However, when they run into them, they're obviously pretty critical. Our folks tend to be, I don't know, we have about 20% significantly injured patients we see. So that's a little bit higher, I think, than most EMS services.
And that's where Drew and I are. It's funny because some of the quotes and things that he says and I say, we're constantly quoting each other. It is very much a program, as he said, even in the Forest Service, to help our own first and foremost. Of course, we're going to assist if we come across somebody else who's ill or injured, and to render that care and to recognize. And this is the important thing that Drew just said, and I just can't emphasize it enough, is that EMS and the wildland fire is a little bit different. It just is. What you have available is different. You don't have an ambulance full of stuff. You have what you can carry, and you may have prolonged care, which most EMS agencies don't. And exactly as Drew said, our EMTs may only see one patient a year, but when they see that patient, it could be their buddy, their crewmate, who is critically injured. And now they're being asked to not just practice on some patient they don't know, but someone they do know in a highly stressful environment. And so it is different. I think Wildland Fire EMS on the whole is different. And it's something that Drew and I and others on the EMC have been working hard to just kind of get that word out there and make folks understand that one size training does not fit all, and it's critical to practice those skills, as Drew said. And I also echo what he said. Our programs, I think, are more alike when it comes to wildland fire than they are different. Forest Service just has that other footprint in it.
And it sounds like you all are constantly trying to make sure that you are similar to some degree, right? So when a responder goes out in those more complex, more remote areas, you're speaking the same language. Yeah. So Todd, I'm going to give about a 30-second background plug, and then I'm going to go to a question to you about EMC. So the NWCG work is done by 1,200 or so folks. 3 of them are on this call who, in addition to all the other stuff they do, working in ERs, working as battalion chiefs and paramedics and doctors and medical directors and supervising and managing folks. They're also contributing towards standards and qualifications in NWCG as part of one of many committees. EMC is one of them. Todd, what is EMC in general? As our local response person, what's the kind of focus that EMC is looking at as it relates to responders?
So EMC is the Emergency Medical Committee, and NWCG is currently in the process of some reorganization and streamlining. EMC basically it's all the agencies that fall underneath that umbrella, the NWCG umbrella, have representation on this committee, and they work together because we're trying to do EMS in an austere environment with people from all over the country who work for hundreds of different doctors. Their protocols are all probably pretty similar, but we're trying to standardize a national response, but with people from all 50 states, all over the country, coming together for short periods of time to build these cohesive work groups to solve problems. And then when you throw in the mix of somebody getting hurt or injured, um, that's where that pre-planning and some of those standards that we've developed really are important. That the first year firefighter can pick up an IAP, go to the last page. There's a medical incident report on the back, and with just some basic training in there, be able to fill that out, communicate that information out, and get help coming and organize their incident.
Yeah, that was like throwing you under the bus as a surprise. So it wasn't meant to be a quiz. Thanks for the description.
Sure.
So now that you've done that, just so we haven't missed the opportunity to learn about your organization, why don't you tell real quick about Sedona and sort of the coverage in your operational profile?
Yeah, so Sedona is an international destination. We see, I think, about 2.5 million visitors a year. We have more trails, miles of trails in and around Sedona than even like the Grand Canyon. And we have folks coming from all over into desert environments, and they have bad days. So we spend a lot of time on the trails. We work heavily with the Department of Public Safety aviation fleet to do short hauls and hoists. We have our own technicians that we augment DPS with so that we can get people from their backcountry wilderness environment where they went for their hike and had a bad day. And we're very busy with that there. So we do a lot of backcountry EMS, and our ambulances are geared towards more of like the typical EMS street scene call in somebody's living room, and then we have packs on our engines that are designed for these backcountry, multiple miles in, limited radio communications, a lot of independent action by company officers to start solving problems, working with the BCs to coordinate aviation assets, or if we're going to use the either the count, because we straddle 2 counties, so we could get one of 2 different county search and rescue teams coming in to help us. So we stay pretty busy with that. And, like most departments in the West, we have a significant wildfire exposure to our organization, to our community. So we send a lot of folks out on fires all over the country, and that's REMS teams, that's engines, that's people on incident management teams. And that's, I heard Michelle and Drew talking about, the green truck or, white truck philosophy and what they're trying to do. And a lot of where this EMS stuff for wildland fire, it's the marriage of the red trucks and these federal green or white trucks. Because yeah, those EMTs that are on those hotshot crews or on the engines, they're going to be the first ones there 90% of the time to start rendering that first care. But we're going to try and bring in those, seasoned professional pre-hospital care providers, medics, and EMTs, who have much better perspectives on how to manage a patient and what the timelines need to look like, and where are we at in this trauma assessment, and what do we need, and what do our timelines look like to get someone to where they need to go.
Awesome. Thanks for that description. It makes sense now to sort of transition into talking about how, we've talked about routine operations for all your different organizations. But there's a point where we start ramping up. And a question came in about the challenges of providing advanced care in a remote environment. I'm interested as that as a starting point for going from that to when we start building incident management teams and some of these more specialized resources. But do you all have comments about, I've heard a few myself that you've already said, but comments about the challenges providing advanced care in these remote environments and how your folks overcome that? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll start and then I can hand it over to whoever else. But I think from my program's perspective again, and I think this might be getting a little bit more into the teams aspect, which I think Todd and Michelle can answer. From our guys, it's the fact that they have to be very mobile. They don't know where they're going when they're called, and it may not be their backyard. Literally, could be hundreds of miles away. Especially when we talk about places like with the jumpers in Alaska and stuff like that. They're literally could be their only resource for a while. And so it's the initial, I like the term own best asset. I was just talking with one of our hotshot crews about this. They have to be their own best asset for some determined amount of time. And for us, a lot of that too is the equipment they can take. And when we look at it, it's really what are the couple life-saving things we're going to be able to do in the field. Let's get equipment for that, and then realize that the rest of it, that other chunk of stuff, is going to kind of be this indeterminate stuff that we have to manage and get them out, but we can't take all the gear for that. And then this kind of more benign stuff, maybe we need a little bit of stuff for that. But when you're talking about people who are carrying stuff on their back all the time, we don't have monitors. We have a pulse ox and a blood pressure cuff, and trying to really get our equipment to meet the demand of the most likely scenario, I think, is the biggest challenge, because you can always want something more, right? And trying to train not only for that we're going to have limited resources, but we may not have a splint. We might have to make that out of something else. I mean, it's kind of a backcountry thought, but our guys get put in that very much, and then realizing what their space requirements are. It's different from an engine crew to the helitat crew to the jumpers. Those are very different amounts of material that in packaging. When you kick a box out of an airplane, it's a little bit different than if you're going to be driving on the top of an engine that's going to sit in 125 degrees in the top of a truck for 4 months in the season. So that I think is actually one of our challenges, is equipment, the size of it, and then also the limitation of what we should take, and always having that ongoing discussion.
I'll just echo onto that. We talk about advanced medical care and what does that look like in the field. And to Drew's point, it's if you're way out there in the middle of Alaska, it looks like what you have on your back and how much MacGyvering you can do. And I see that Kevin's been posting some stuff in the chat here that folks are asking, is like, what strategies, et cetera. I would say that, one of the best things that we can now offer our folks, both BLM and Forest Service, is in this day and age of communication upgrades with satellite communications and text text to reach or 911 or Starlink or whatever you have. If you're in a situation where you're in the middle of nowhere and you really can't get out and help can't get in, they can at least communicate with one of us as a medical director, and we can be, we're not right there in the thick of it. So we have a little bit of a cooler head, a little bit of a better perspective, and maybe guide them through some MacGyvering, if you will. I hope I'm not dating myself by using that term, but through some MacGyvering of solutions that they may not have thought of in the field. And we have this happen once or twice a year where, someone will call and we're like, this is where I am. This is the situation. We can't get out right now. It's dark, it's smoky, whatever. What can we do? What can we do? This is what I've got. And to Drew's point, improvising splints, making sure they're upright if, their head is elevated, if it's a head injury, all these kinds of questions that we can try to help. So technology-wise, what can we carry in the field? Probably good comms is the best thing, but even that's not perfect, as we know. And then the training, you got to fall back on the training. You've just got to fall back on that training. And that's why the training that Drew does, that we do, is so important, to practice those real world, not in the back of an ambulance type scenarios.
And
Todd,
to
anything?
add on to that, yeah, a lot of it comes down to planning and planning ahead and pre-planning a lot of these things. And so when we work with some of the forests in the Southwest region, we ask them, if you were to have a fire, what's the worst place you could have a fire? And everyone knows their worst place, right? And then we tell them, now we ask them, what would you do if someone got hurt there? And that's where the conversation begins to, like, well, what do we need to bring? What are the technologies that exist? You look at the Coyote Fire, which was probably about 10 or 15 years ago now in southern New Mexico. They were 6 miles in. A firefighter was basically impaled by an agave spike through his Achilles tendon and could not walk out. And the medics that ended up going in there, they had to do some stuff that was outside their normal scope of practice in order to get that individual out, that we weren't flying them, weather was coming in. And so, afterwards, they had a discussion with their medical director on what they did. And he said, why didn't you call me? And there's no cell coverage in southern New Mexico where they were, and the radios were even touch and go. So, a lot of it comes down to planning ahead, which is where the medical units or the medical sections on large fires can really shine, by having those plans built, having those extraction times already developed. The risk, I'm going to murder this, the risk management dashboard, I believe it's called these days, has the ground extraction time map. And so that's data that people can look at. It's on the NIFC goals site, our GIS site, and you can start to plan. All right, we know they're 4 to 5 hours out, they're 6+ hours out. So a lot of this comes down to what can we do ahead of time to give us the greatest chance of success when or if something happens.
So as you start, well, you have an emerging wildland incident, not medical, but you start to build an incident management team and responders on some piece of earth. How does the medical system for that specific group of responders start to emerge? How does it grow?
So, the analogy I give people is, we're going to build a brand new 911 system in 24 to 48 hours, with people from all over the country, with various medical directors, and a communication system run on car batteries. And we do it. It takes a lot of work. And that first, like I said, 24, 48, sometimes 72 hours is the big ramp up time for medical on fires, to start figuring all this stuff out, starting to develop who your local resources are for your ground transportation, what aviation assets exist in the area that you're in. And that's a lot of the background stuff that goes into that 206 that you see on the IAPs. And historically, like 10 years ago, if you were to pull an IAP and look at the 206, it would have been pretty rudimentary, and it might have been a page. But now you go to some of these fires and the 206 is, 5-6 pages long, and we're building out individual division by division plans to help identify the resources, identify, LZs to build a response before something happens, so that we're not caught in the middle of a bad day trying to figure it out on the fly. There's just so much we can do ahead of time with the right people, and in close coordination with the entire incident management team to make sure we have a much higher probability of success.
And I will say, we know areas tend to burn over and over again, right? We end up in the same places frequently. And they're starting to build out libraries of 206s that folks can reference. And then it's just a matter of double checking, is that stuff still there? And yeah, 100%. I know when I was first writing 206s under NDMS 20 some odd years ago, if I had 3 phone numbers on there, it was a good 206. And now it's way more robust. And I'll just say, the initial days is where we get a lot of the questions and concerns. If you may not have a Med-El, you may not have an incident management team, maybe you're in an initial attack phase and something has happened and you don't know what to do. Again, that's where we try to build in the resources of EMS coordinators or myself or Dr. Souther to be available, or worst case scenario, going through local 911, going through dispatch to text to 911 to relay communications 3 and 4 layers deep. Can be done in those days. And then once you get an incident management team on board and a Med-El, they can build all that out. And I'll just say, sometimes I see folks really building out very, very robust air response. And that has its limitations. And then I see people really, really building out robust technical rescue. And truly you have to have depth, you have to have redundancy, you have to have a backup to the backup to the backup. I mean, we're all in this wildland fire world. We know this, right? You have plan A, plan B, plan C, all the way down the alphabet if you want. And I think that the right mix of medical assets is some combination of 2 or 3 plans. And then, of course, the ability to change it on the fly, depending on the scenario and what has happened or what you need.
And that's a
Adaptability.
challenge. That's a
That
challenge
is the
for us right
challenge.
now
Mhm.
because the medical unit leader is, historically wasn't, it was just kind of, the person in the 10 if you needed to like some band-aids or you had blisters. And that medical unit, that medical section concept is now a much more frequently implemented position on a fire because for whatever reason, like, when I was on cruise and running hot shots and stuff, like if someone got hurt, it was a rare thing. If it felt like it seems like it's more common now. Nobody can really tell us why. If it's because seasons are longer, people are more fatigued. If we're going further and faster and deeper into the woods, we don't know. But those systems are getting tested every day on almost every large fire. There are days when you can have 2 or 3, yellow or red, moderate or critical patients on a wildland fire, and those positions are definitely proving their worth when we're getting people to definitive care in times that we would have never been able to do before.
And to tie that back into the training stuff that we were just talking about, I think it's the good Med-Els, the good medical folks who are on a wildland fire will use that time to do that training. Because if we're all doing our job right, we shouldn't have any patients. We should be sitting around for 12 or 14 hours every day waiting for patients. So building some medical scenarios or some IWI scenarios into that downtime is key. And when I talk to folks on the ground who've been in various fires assignments where they've run into someone who's really proactive in doing that, I mean, the reviews are just rave reviews. If there's a medic on a crew, whether it's a contract crew or a fed crew, who takes an hour to teach a mini class on the side of the truck, that's invaluable.
And Michelle, you sort of answered this question. I'd be interested to hear Drew's viewpoint, though. But the question came in of incorporating scenario-based or high-stress simulations into the wildland medical training. Sounds like you're doing it, Michelle. Are you guys doing it in BLM too?
Yeah, we generally set a full, like, preseason at least for part of their critical training that's required. They 80% of our providers go through a field day, and it's not perfect. I mean, it's hard to exactly recreate. That being said, I'm a big believer in the stress inoculation training, and so we try and do it. We're always in the field, and I try and make it in the field the conditions which they'll be practicing in. People are told to bring their fire packs. They're told to wear yellows and greens. We use radio channels. We'll usually communicate with our dispatch, and we do we bring training. All of our training gear includes basically what they would have, and we get down to the point where, like, if they're taking vital signs, they better be taking the real vital signs on the patient. They have to put gloves on. They have to turn the oxygen tanks on. We use quite a bit of, moulage and fake blood. We make them actually cut clothes, and when we do practice injections, they're giving injections to people. So we try and get as close as we can. I think that helps. I've had some good feedback on that. I remember during one of the tree strikes we had, the provider said, he's like, yeah, about 4 or 5 minutes into it, just felt like the training scenario we did a couple weeks ago. And I was like, well, that's a pretty big win for us. We can't mimic some of the other problems, but I think that we try and do as best. And I will say that takes a lot. It's easier to just say, oh, let's go in the back of the classroom and lay someone down. But where I see, all the mistakes, or you pull out the gloves and, like, you rip them, because that's what happens. And a lot of our training scenarios at the end, everyone's rushing down. We put them in our extraction modules, and we're hiking them down the hill, and it's 5 minutes later. It's like, hey, where's your bag? It's back up on the hill, and someone forgot to do that. And so those training errors, I think, are hard to mimic outside of the field conditions. And so for our program, we really stress and put a lot of time and energy into that. And then, like Michelle said, we do encourage training on incident when possible. It does help. And I think there was another question about technology. I agree with Michelle. Like, the communication technology, Starlink and stuff like that, is really, it's pretty soon that we're going to be texting back and forth about little things. That'll have its own problems, but we're pretty close to that. But also, just some of the high fidelity simulation stuff that's out there now is pretty good. We've worked with some contractors and stuff that have full size mannequins that do quite a bit of stuff. I'm sure most people have seen those. Again, it's not all perfect, but I can tell you that for our providers that don't get that many calls, this is as close as they're going to get until they have to do something. And so that's always kind of my impression. This is where we're at. And then I also tell people, do whatever you suck at. So we've got some people who are actually pretty good medically. They come in there from ski patrol. They've had 500 patient interactions, but they're new, and they've not run an incident over the radio. And so and they're a little timid to do so. And so the first thing that's natural for them is to go ahead and do the patient care, and they look great doing it. But they're squad leaders on the radio, and so we reverse those roles very quickly and make sure that people who don't have experience with the radio or running the IWI, they get that, and the people who are a little timid and don't have a lot of patient care contacts, they should be doing the patient care. So that's my take on it.
I will say, as Drew knows, I'm always a little bit envious of his training program because of the way his program is structured. They have a little more uniformity than we do, but totally agree with everything he just said. Is making people practice what they suck at and getting out there in the field and getting it done. And practicing the call-ins is definitely key. We've had some trainings where things have gone south. We've done some region-wide trainings where we did a nighttime mass casualty accident in the winter because it was off season, and we thought that was a really good idea. And we lost a person. We lost a volunteer patient, and by the time we found them, they were truly hypothermic, and we kind of, so yeah, training, and making it real.
And I
like
would
the
just
lesson.
say,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, and then, like, that's the federal side, but then when you bring in the cooperators who are your red trucks, and the contractors who are providing that EMS care, they might be really great medical providers, but they don't know how to integrate their medical care into the world, and the operation, and the tempo, and the slang we use in the wildland side of the world. So, like, that's where, like, the IMTs a lot of times will do, like, a slower days, or when the fire's winding down, they'll try and incorporate some sort of, like, simulations on actual incidents, so that those folks, if they didn't do anything that fire, hopefully they're at least seeing how this whole machine is going to come together and work. Because running a 911 call on Miss Smith in her living room is very different, as Michelle and Dr. Souther both said, than on the side of a hill somewhere, because it's not Miss Smith. it's the people that you're there caring for. That's somebody's best friend or buddy on a crew, and you're managing a much more dynamic scene than I think a lot of folks give it credit for.
Lessons learned are practice what you suck at and engage your partners. That's what I just got from that. So good lessons learned. So going back to the incident, it's building up. You got more and more folks. Been some innovation, and primarily I'm thinking about the rapid extraction modules or REM. I know there's other innovations happening, but let's talk about REM for a little bit. Todd, where did that even come from? I know Sedona's been an innovator in it. Where did it come from? Where is it? And where's it going?
So, there's no one there's opinions on where REMS came from, and I'll go ahead and give California credit because it did originate there. But the concept of a REMS module is probably about like 15 to 20 years old. And the idea was you were going to have a pre-packaged, in the structured parlance, like a RIC team that was there to just, their only job was if someone got hurt, how are we going to get them out? And the technical rescue component of that, the rope component, was a big focus of that early on. So REMS kind of bumped along for a while, and then it got more and more popular. And then it got popular enough, and there was enough of these teams out there that like we needed some sort of standard because it was just the Wild West. You had people showing up, teams showing up with 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Did they have a UTV? What kind of equipment were they carrying? So because of that, EMC, the Emergency Medical Committee, created a task group to basically build a national standard for REMS to mirror like the standards we have for literally everything else in wildland fire. It just makes sense, right? So I want to say that was probably the end of 21 that tasking came out. And so we worked on that for about 2 years. I was the NWCG representative to the REMS task group. And then we worked closely with CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE actually approached NWCG and said, hey, let's build this, let's build a standard. So we had 2 co-chairs, myself, and then Bravo Septavia, who's a captain for Pasadena Fire, South Ops. And we co-chaired this REMS task group to basically build the standard. And we engaged hotshots, we engaged medical unit leaders, we engaged the structure world where we could, the contract world, like technically they can't have input on a contract they might bid on, which was definitely, it's just the way the contracting world works. There was not much we could do with it, but we did solicit their input wherever we could. And then we built a standard and put that out, I want to say the end of last year. It's had some modifications to it since its first introduction. Notably, the single resource boss requirement was a hot topic issue, and we're still working through that, and we're still working to make that a better standard. When you think about like where we are with Type 1 or Type 2 or Type 3 engines or hotshot crews, like those things have all, they've evolved over time, and nobody creates a standard that's perfect the first time out of the chute, right? There's feedback. There's, what did you think about this? And so it's a document that's currently even still going under revisions, and how can we make that better? But the evolution for REMS is away from, we're here for technical rope rescue. Hotshots don't usually fall in wells. There's probably not a tremendous amount of data on how many rope rescues have been conducted on a wildland fire. But like the new Type 1 REM standard includes basic extrication tools, because we roll over a lot more water tenders or crew buggies than we have people needing to be rescued off the side of a cliff. So we're trying to match that resource to the needs that we see coming from the incidents themselves. So it's a work in progress. I think we've come a long way to get where we are right now. It's a ton of work. And we're trying to incorporate a better platform and a better system for how we get people out of bad spots. And those REMS modules should be seen as, in my opinion, leadership on the fire line, they can offload a lot of that, that mental strain from the division, that they're going to show up and be like, all right, here's where we're working. This is what we've got. These are our transport times. These are our LZs. We know this crew's here, that crew's there. This is high risk. We're going to pre-plan this. And they're going to bring those plans to the division and be like, here's what we think. Let's have a discussion on it. And the division can say, well, what about this? What about that? It's a conversation. And then the REMS has got that built, takes that back to the Med-El or the medical section chief. This is our plan for this area. And then when something happens, like, it's like, all right, let's turn the key on this plan that we started and get the engine going.
I'll just tag on to the great work that Todd and Robert did. It was a phenomenally large lift to come up with this standard, and to say that there really was no standard, maybe in California, but no place else. And went on fires in the Northwest where, you had REMS teams operating out of a minivan with dental floss, basically. There was really, truly a wide variety. And there were folks doing fantastic, fantastic things, great work, and folks who weren't. And the idea was we've just got to come up with the good support that our folks in Wildland Fire deserve, no matter what color t-shirt they're wearing. And that was sort of what this task group was tasked with. And yeah, to Todd's point, it wasn't perfect. There were a couple things. I was the medical person on that task group, and I will say that there were a couple of medical things that went through into the published standard. And I was like, oh my gosh, geez, I can't even believe that I didn't catch that. I've looked at this document 75 times. But I will say that the medical support community for Wildland Fire has been really great at providing feedback. You can translate great however you'd like, but we really appreciated all the feedback that they've given us, because the only way we know how to tweak it or fix it is when we get that feedback. And it is a tricky area to navigate because, again, as Todd said, we can't technically ask a contractor what they would build because we're building a contract and then they can't bid on it. And so it was a thankless task that Todd had. I think he and his team did a really good job. And it's going to continue to tweak forward, and hopefully, like most things in the medical world, should be living documents. They really should be living documents.
And the end state here is that we want to bring as much advanced life support care as we can out to the field. If you got a burn injury, if you've got an airway issue from, anaphylaxis, whatever it is, like we feel that like we can deliver the same level of care that you would expect in your living room in a major metropolitan city out to the wildland fire community. It just takes a little bit more planning and work. The equipment exists. The communications is phenomenal. Like the concept of technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable between magic. That's the concept with cellular communications now and satellite communications. That stuff was, unheard of just 5 years ago. And some of the other things that we're seeing coming out of the medical community for stuff that we can do out there, more robust protocols and more invasive things that can make a difference in someone's, survivability to a traumatic injury is huge. And we're pushing that stuff out as fast as we can. It's a lot of change, and there's been a lot of change, and there's been more change in the medical response to wildland firefighters in the last 10 years, maybe just 5 years, than the last 20 or 30. And it's because the Forest Service has invested in a medical director that Dr. Drew has been brought over on the, DOI side, and that they're integrating down with these EMS physicians all over the country to build better systems to educate and train and equip the responders to go out and take care of the wildland firefighters. And I've been on a lot of EMS assignments. I've been on a lot of bad days on wildland fires, and there were hard lessons learned there. And we're taking those hard lessons and we're applying them to the future. So we're always going to have bad days. That's just the way it is, but anything we can do to help minimize those bad days, or at the very least, be able to tell everybody that was involved in that bad day, everything that could have been done was done. That's huge for mental health long term.
hear to that. And as Michelle, you're saying that firefighters are great at giving feedback. I'm looking at feedback coming in now that says, the more that federal wildfire programs can focus on that basic level of care for their folks and reach into local government for the advance. Great, got it. Feedback. I will say there's a ton of untapped capacity in local government, which is great. We're getting to, but we also like the feedback of REMS equals fire scope. And Todd, kudos to you for recognizing it. Probably did come out of California, but people are passionate about REMS. Drew, when I met you, I think it was when I met you, is when you were bringing standards of care for the wildland environment to us at executive board and showing that when things like that are coming down the pipe, new ideas or perhaps old ideas that are being operationalized, what's the best way for somebody to approach that as a new idea comes into play?
For just so I can clarify, you're saying like if we got a new idea for scope of practice or how things are going?
Yeah, or even just an innovative idea like REMS. How do we operationalize those things in this complex interagency environment?
Sure. I mean, most good ideas are going to come from the field, right? I mean, they're not going to come from the national offices. And so there's a couple pathways. One, if you're a federal person, I would say you probably know the pathways. It's, we have our Michelle or myself, our providers are bringing us stuff fairly common. They'll say, hey, look at this, look at that. The other way is through the EMC. We get a lot of comments and questions sent to us from the EMC. It can be a little overwhelming. Some of it's like, hey, I want to do this or have this new greatest tool. And I think sometimes we're intentionally a little slow to move to adopt things that are the newest on the block, just because there's some reasons for that. But those are really the mechanisms to do it. And we, right now, I mean, like the medical trailers is kind of an area that's newish, and we what tends to happen is we get some interested people that say this is an idea and we're trying to fill a void, like all new technology does, and we start to see some forms of this coming out, and then eventually it becomes popular, or the teams start to request enough of them that we say, hey, we should create like standards and stuff like that, and so that's generally the process that we see happen.
Got it. Thanks for that. All right, so this is the final question, which I'm just as a forewarning, I'm going to go the same way that I introduced you all, so you can prepare emotionally. Um, what do you wish we would have talked about that we didn't? And sort of what's the future in wildland fire medicine in general? Todd, go to you.
Oh, okay. Um, I think dialing in the REMs a little bit, and then I think so. The medical folks that are out there, REMs, AMBO folks, single resource medics, medic teams, like they're the only ones that have no formal education and very very limited pathways within NWCG 310-1. So for me, it's formalizing some of those positions a little bit more. All those medical positions currently set, they're not even in 310, they're in the addendum. So it's weird because like there's the addendum is where all the stuff that doesn't necessarily fit, but you're going to have medical providers on every fire, right? So why is that not in 310? And why is there not, a course or a career progression from a line resource, to a medical unit leader to a medical section chief? Why is there no curriculum developed for that yet? So I think that's where that's the next 5 to 10 years, is creating that same pathway that exists for all the operational or aviation or logistics or plans, right? It's that same pathway and building continuity and people that stick around for a long time and have lots of looks at the problem.
Awesome. Michelle, what's your perspective?
I will add on to that. I think in the future, we need more tightening of communications among all of the medical people on the field. We've fully recognized that the vast majority of medical support on a large wildland fire incident is not a federal person. So it's great for me to be able to talk to the Forest Service folks and Drew to be able to talk to the BLM folks. But how do we get that out to all of our contractors and cooperators? That's a constant challenge for us. We are trying to improve those channels of communication, but there isn't one similar to that, and Todd and Drew are going to probably roll their eyes because they know I'm passionate about this, but the medical unit leader position, you can become a medical unit leader if you have an EMT. That's it. That's the only, other than your basic fire training. You don't have to have a medical director. You don't have to have protocols. You don't, you attended your medical unit leader training in 1995 as a one and done. And that's not good enough in the medical world for any of us. I mean, I, as a physician, I have continuing requirements every year. I think it's super important that we somehow build a path forward for the medical unit leaders to stay current. These medical contracts and tools we were just talking about, REMS, trailers, all this stuff, it's in constant change and evolution. And how is the medical unit leader going to know what those changes or evolutions are if we don't kind of force their hand into some sort of an updating process? So that is one of the things that we're talking about. I would love to see in the next 5 years. I'll be quiet now, you guys. You can roll your eyes at me.
Oh, good.
No eye rolling. Drew, why don't you take us home?
Sure. So from my perspective, it's going to be, the professionalism and recognition of wildland fire as kind of a unique subset of medicine. We're starting to get there, but historically, I think we've started with EMTs and we've taken some from wilderness medicine and military medicine, the aspects which are there, and tried to apply them directly into the wildland fire field. And we're starting to recognize that we do have aspects of all those, but we also have some unique things, and so it's becoming its own specialty, which I think is really unique, and we'll see that develop more and more. It's been coming, but as it becomes more professional, there's going to be more accountability too, and I think we'll start to see true data come out, and that's one of our things that we do work at the EMC is how are we going to actually get data and standards, because our standards should be made off of the data. I mean, right now, it's very hard for us to know exactly what goes on, especially at the incident levels, because everyone's siloed, and so their PCRs go somewhere else. And so having ways in the future, systems that we can obtain that data from, to make those that actually I think will help us right size our response. Because right now, some fires have so many medical assets, you can't not throw a rock and hit one, which probably isn't right. And then some have so few. And so trying to understand where that is, I think, is going to come from data and that professionalism. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think in 10 years, this will be the expectations of the wildland fire medicine is going to be vastly different than it is today. And as it is today, it's vastly different than it was 10 years ago. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Cheers to that. Dr. Southard, Dr. Curry, Chief Miranda, thank you all for helping keep us and the responders and communities safe. Really appreciate you all, what you've done with REMS, what you continue to do with Emergency Medical Committee, and making us better now and for the next 10 years. And very appreciative that you joined us today. With that, Kevin, why don't you close us out?
I got not much else to say except that well done, everyone. And I was just here kind of being a student of the game, taking notes and thinking about how we can continue to talk more about this in future shows and TSI and WUI. So thank you all for your time. And if you want to subscribe to the calendar, it's in the link of all the different channels. And we'll be coming out with a schedule for 2026 at Wildfire Wednesdays. And just thankful for you, Eric, for continuing to lead this. And if you got any questions, reach out to Eric or these other speakers. We are here to listen and answer questions that you have and ways that we can continue to move the ball forward collectively to create better outcomes for first responders. So again, Michelle, Todd, and Andrew, and Eric as well, have a great, safe holiday season. Thank you for all that you do. And